Okay, let's get serious. Let's try to sort out around this time of year. I think every year now that we've done this. What is this, like our sixth year? I've completely lost track of time. But it's time. I think it's time for us to check in with the league and figure out like where are we kind of roughly seeing these teams. Cody has a term that we use around here, the inner circle contenders. That's our serious championship contenders. Then we have a group that's kind of on the outside usually. Then we have good teams that are interesting and frisky, and then, playoff teams. And we're trying to just sort out the small sample madness. Like, for instance, are the Houston Rockets actually going to finish with the 4th seed in the Western Conference? So I assume I'm gonna make some assumptions here, which doesn't go well. I'm going to assume you have the Celtics as an inner circle championship contender, and I'm going to assume you have the Nuggets as an inner circle championship contender. Both of those teams have the pedigree. They have the lineup on paper. They look good when you watch them, and they have crushed the league to start the year. Both those teams have great metrics up and down the board. Do you want to put anyone else in your inner circle championship contender group right now?
Okay, so let's get philosophical here. Let's define some things.
Is it going to be the question I asked you earlier?
I don't even know what you asked me earlier.
What is it? I asked you a philosophical question earlier, and I told you to put it in your pipe and smoke it, remember?
Well, now we're going to pass that pipe right back here. I straight up don't even remember the question, Ben.
I don't remember the question either. All right, let's go.
So when you say inner circle contending team, are you thinking like fast forward to June and this team is holding the championship trophy? Are you surprised? Like, is that kind of what you're thinking with the inner circle talk?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you created the term, so I think that sums it up. This is a team that you on your short list, as you said, you're envisioning them being a team that can easily win in June. Yeah.
Okay. I think right now those are the only two teams actually in the inner circle. There might be a couple like bubble teams that need to prove it a little bit more, but those are the only two teams that are like solidly in the circle right now. Is that how you feel?
That's exactly how I feel. So we'll just table them. We'll put a little pin in them. We'll get back to them when more interesting stuff happens. Cool. The bubble teams is where it starts to get fun right now, I think, Cody. Because it's basically like, who's really legitimately very good? Not legitimately good in the sense that they could have a nice seed and they could maybe win a playoff round. Like, who else is knocking on the door for when we come back in a month? We go, of course they have to be included in this conversation. We have more than 2 teams that are championship contenders this year. Who are some of these other teams for you?
Well, I think one of the first teams we have to talk about here are the Philadelphia 76ers. I don't know how much we want to talk about them today, but they are on an absolute tear this year so far.
I think so. I think we have more stuff to get to with Philly later on, so we will also put a little pin in them and come back to them. But Philly is definitely a team that I think is very, very good, and the questions we'll have to address when we circle back to them is, can this be a team? Will they make a move in the midseason? What's going to happen with Kelly Oubre's situation? Kelly Oubre, for those who missed it, was unfortunately in an accident. He was hit by a car and he has some injuries, and he's okay, but he's going to miss a significant amount of time. They hope, or they say it's not season ending, but it will be a significant amount of time because there's some broken bones and things like that. So they have to kind of continue to sort out their lineup. I don't know what they're going to look like in January or February, but I think the short of it is with Philly, you have Embiid, you have Tyrese Maxey, and you have Nick Nurse as a new coach, and the things they've done with the roster are really strong. I would definitely put them in this next group. I'm not ready to move them up into the inner circle contender. Probably depth is a big thing that I want to see with them going forward, but yeah, that's where I am on Philly.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. Tyrese Maxey just dropped his first 50-piece of his career, I think, like yesterday. And I only watched a bit of that game, but it looks like he's developing as a handler. It looks like he's developing as a decision maker. He's able to just move a little bit quicker without Harden there and new coaching there. So I think there's some really interesting changes there. But like you said, like once we get to the playoffs, if a team's able to, you have like the Brooklyn Nets out there and they're like, we're just going to double team Embiid anytime he exists on the court. Like, is Maxey going to be able to figure that out? And even if they're able to scheme for a way that they can, like, take out both of them or really defend both of them well, what other guys on the 76ers are dangerous? So I think there's, like you just said, there's still some questions in terms of the third guy that's going to step up, the fourth guy. Because I think, like, defensively, I really like their defensive personnel. And I might, even though the statistics right now are pointing towards an offense that's stronger, I might like the defensive ecosystem more than the offensive ecosystem. That's probably a really early thought process on them right now, but that's just kind of where I'm leaning towards right now. So offensively, I want to see how the other guys are able to step up.
Okay, next team for me that's potentially in this group that's very interesting to think about right now is your hometown team, sort of, the Minnesota Timberwolves. They have started the season 7-2. They have the best defense in the league by a mile. We will continue to monitor this situation. We might have some deep dive video content on it coming up in the future. But just for perspective, we talked about that 113 league-wide offensive rating. Timberwolves giving up 103 points per 100 possessions. That is 10 points better than the league. Off the top of my head, if that holds, that'll be the best defense, best relative defense in NBA history. But it's a small sample. We see starts like this all the time. I think the thing to know here, as we talked about last episode with the Defensive Player of the Year candidates, is they are pretty loaded defensively. I think it's legit. Anthony Edwards coming on gives them a little more punch in general on offense, but also I'm thinking about transitioning from being a young team to a more veteran team. Kyle Anderson getting good minutes. You just have the ability to win close games, and we've already seen that. The rock fight that they had with the Celtics recently that went into overtime, and Anthony Edwards taking over the game in overtime. So they look like a very strong team to me, very legit. Again, I wouldn't put them in the inner circle crew, but I think this is a team that, at the end of the year, looks like they might be one of the 5 or 6 best teams in basketball. So they're right in this next group for me right now.
And just for context, I'm pretty sure you just said they're 10 points better than league average on defense. The 2004 Detroit Pistons, after the Rasheed Wallace trade, I think for the rest of that season they were like 12 points better.
Yeah,
than
no,
league
that's
average.
not fair. There was only half a year with the after the trade and then the deadline or whatever. But yeah, that's the gold standard.
I still think it's important to show that like they're sort of approaching that ballpark, right? They're sort of approaching it, but they're still like a couple points off from like a full blown Rasheed Wallace Pistons post trade. Let me ask you something about the Timberwolves then. Why, if they, we talked last time, they have some of the best defensive personnel. They have our current defensive player of the year pick. We both really like Jaden McDaniels on defense. Like you said, Kyle Anderson's just brilliant everywhere. I love the man. Why are they not an inner circle team for you right now?
Well, I think it's that deep playoff. I've talked about this before. The difference between winning 2 playoff series in the NBA playoff tournament and 4 is a big level, especially if you have a high seed. Because what it means is you can beat a low seed or a play-in team, and you can beat a 4 or a 5 seed or something like that with home court, maybe a 3 seed if the 3 seed isn't that strong. But when you get to the Final Four, typically, you're playing the other championship contenders, and I don't yet see a strong reason to believe that in a playoff setting, Minnesota's constructed, they have the roster, they have the experience, whatever you want to say, to really be considered like neck and neck with some of those teams they would see down the stretch. But I mean, if you want to push back and make the case, I'm all ears.
No, I really don't want to make the case. I think defensively, I think that their defense should be able to hold up. I know there's been a lot of clowning of Rudy Gobert in the playoffs. I don't foresee that sort of thing happening again in the playoffs just because of the personnel that's around them. But offensively, and I know right now their offense is a little bit negative. I think they're a point worse than league average in terms of offensive rating. But when it comes down to a playoff series, let's say conference semifinals, let's say conference finals if they happen to make it that far, I don't right now trust either Karl Anthony Towns or Anthony Edwards at a high-level decision-making sort of situation. So I'm even thinking about that Celtics game, and I think there's a chance that, like, if they replay that again, the Timberwolves probably should have and easily could have won in regulation. And I think a big part of what pushed them to be so close that they went to overtime is Anthony Edwards sometimes gets the hero ball thing in his head. He goes in, he's going to 17 seconds on the shot clock. I'm going to pull from 19 feet away. Or I'm going to back down and take this turnaround, right? Because when he gets like a head start and he gets downhill, he's one of the most unstoppable players. But sometimes he's just like, I need to take this jump shot. And sometimes Towns, we've seen this in the playoffs a few times, he's the captain of getting in his head during a game, right? He starts getting angry and he throws these like he's a softball player, Ben. Like he like curls it like a bowling ball and like whips it underhand. And it's just like the angrier he gets, the more like wild those passes get. So both of those guys right now, I think, still need to show me some maturation in terms of decision making on offense. And that, to me, those are the two main things holding me back from really thinking they're contenders.
Thanks for listening. You can find the full episode of this Thinking Basketball podcast on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, or wherever you enjoy podcasts.